Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're looking at something I think, everyone struggles with at some point. That huge gap between having a really big dream and actually making it happen.
Right. We all have these amazing ideas, these huge ambitions, a bestseller, maybe starting a business, changing careers entirely.
Exactly. And you often start with so much energy, a really positive attitude. But the sources we're digging into today argue that, that positive mindset alone is just talk if there's nothing solid behind it.
It really is. It's about the difference between just wanting something and having the actual mechanics in place to get it. Think of the mindset as the fuel, maybe, but without a plan, a proper, structured, adaptable plan, you're just not going to get there.
An adaptable plan, okay?
Yeah, and that's our mission today, really, to pull out the core mechanics of what makes planning effective. We need to figure out how to structure things, how to keep the motivation going, and crucially, how to deal with reality when it inevitably throws a curveball.
Okay, let's get practical then. The first piece of advice is almost gospel in self-help circles. Write it down. Why is that simple act so important? It feels like more than just a reminder.
Oh, it absolutely is. Writing it down creates this sort of psychological commitment.
Yeah.
When you put your goals, and maybe even more importantly, your steps, down on paper.
It makes them feel more real.
Exactly. They shift from just being a wish in your head to something documented, something you've actually committed to. It's about self-accountability, really, because it's much harder to ignore a plan that's written down, right? Especially when you look at it and see whether you've actually made progress or not. Writing forces you to confront that.
That makes sense. And I think one of the most critical points the sources make, something easily confused, is this. Your plan is not your goal. Can you unpack that a bit?
Yeah, that's vital. They are definitely not the same thing. Your goal is the big destination, where you want to end up. The plan, that's the route. It's the specific, actionable things you do every day to move towards that goal.
Okay, so like an example.
Sure. The goal might be running a marathon. That's 26.2 miles, the big achievement. But the plan isn't run a marathon. The plan is get up this morning, run 3 miles, tomorrow maybe 4. Stretching, eating right. Those are the actions, the controllable parts that make up the journey to the goal.
Right, the things you actually do.
Yeah.
But what about that feeling people get stuck in where they feel like they need the entire plan mapped out, like all 100 steps before they can even start step 1?
Yes. That's a huge momentum killer. The sources really emphasize that you probably already know the main pillars, the big signposts on the road.
Like the major stages.
Exactly. One author used their journey to getting an LPCC license. That's a licensed professional clinical counselor. They knew the big steps. Grad school, get the degree, do an internship, pass the big licensing exam. That's the framework.
Okay.
But did they know exactly which internship or precisely how they'd study for that exam before they even started grad school? No. You start with the big pieces you do know. The rest, as the source says, will come to light as you progress. You figure it out along the way.
Which leads nicely into this other big hurdle, control. A lot of plans apparently fail because the steps people set are just not things they can actually control.
Precisely. We feel like we failed, but often it's because we set a goal based on an output we wanted instead of an input we could perform. We aim for things that depend on other people, or luck, or the market.
Like getting a certain number of sales or followers or reviews.
Exactly. The classic example given was trying to get 100 online book reviews in a month. You just can't make people write reviews. That's an output, completely outside your direct control.
So the shift isn't just making goals measurable, it's making the steps actionable by me. Focusing on what I put in, not what comes out.
That's the core of it. You have to focus on a step that you can actually do that's feasible. So, using that book review example, if you know roughly 1 in 100 readers might leave a review, then to get 100 reviews, you need about 10,000 readers to see the book. So the controllable plan isn't get 100 reviews, it's give 10,000 free advance copies to potential reviewers. That's an action you can take. It's within your control. That's the key question. What can I actually control here?
Okay, so we have controllable daily actions. But these big dreams often take years. How do you keep going? How do you structure that long game? That seems to be about timelines and milestones.
Right, you need that structure for the long haul. The recommended method is actually to start at the end, picture the goal already achieved, and then work your way backward. Identify all the key milestones, big and small, that need to happen to get you there.
Like slicing up a pizza, the source said, into manageable pieces.
Exactly that analogy. You take this massive goal, maybe years away, and break it down into smaller, achievable steps.
And using that LPCC example again, that took 6 years. You absolutely need those checkpoints just to keep your sanity, right? Which is where celebration comes in.
Absolutely critical. Those smaller milestones aren't just markers, they're opportunities to recognize the hard work and actually, celebrate a bit.
Because 6 years without any joy sounds impossible.
It really does. If you wait until the very end, the whole thing becomes this joyless grind. By setting shorter milestones, passing that first semester, finishing a key project phase, you create chances to reward yourself. It builds positive feedback loops in your brain. It tells your brain, hey, this effort leads to good things, which helps you stick with it.
Like the author rewarding themselves with headphones after passing the first semester. A tangible reward for a tangible step.
Precisely. It anchors that feeling of accomplishment.
Okay, so anchoring success. And speaking of visualizing success, that brings us to vision boards, where you're told to go big, put up
Mhm.
pictures of private jets, dream vacations, pure aspiration.
Visual motivation is definitely powerful, but one piece of research we looked at as a really interesting twist here. It mentions neuroscientist Dr. Tara Swart and her preference for what she calls action boards.
Action boards, okay, different from vision boards. What's the neuroscience behind that? Why might just visualizing the end result actually backfire?
Well, it seems to involve a couple of key brain processes. First, there's something called value tagging. Your brain basically files information based on importance, and it gives higher priority to things it sees repeatedly.
Okay.
Now, if your board only shows the outcome, the finished book, the award, the beach, and you look at it all the time, your brain gets a little hit of satisfaction like you've already achieved it.
So it tricks your reward system.
Kind of. It gives you that dopamine hit without connecting it to the work needed. It can actually kill your motivation because you feel a sense of accomplishment prematurely. The research is clear. Visualizing only the result without the process can hinder progress.
So the board needs to remind you of the steps, the efforts, the early mornings, the studying, the actual work involved.
Exactly. Images that represent the process. That's the action part of the action board. It needs to motivate the doing, not just the dreaming.
And what's the second mechanism?
The second part is about familiarity. Our brains are wired to be a bit wary of new, potentially scary things, like, say, public speaking, if you've never done it.
Makes sense.
If you repeatedly look at images associated with that big goal, maybe a picture of you looking confident on a stage, your brain gradually stops seeing that scenario as threateningly new. It becomes more familiar, less scary. It helps ease that natural fear response.
Okay, interesting. So action boards, not just vision boards. We've written the plan, got controllable steps, visualized the action. Phase 3 seems to be about bringing other people into the picture, sharing the plan. But wait, isn't there an argument against talking about goals too much?
Yeah.
That you get the satisfaction without the work?
Yes, that's a valid concern, and the source material does address it. It's about the kind of sharing. Just talking vaguely about goal to get validation, that can be risky, that premature satisfaction thing again. But sharing your structured plan with specific chosen people, that creates real accountability. And importantly, it reinforces your own belief. Every time you articulate the detailed plan out loud, it solidifies it for you, makes it feel more real, helps quiet those internal doubts.
And these accountability partners need to be active members of your team, not just people you tell things to.
That's the key difference. If you just announce, I'm going to exercise, it's easy to hit snooze. But if you have a friend waiting for you at the gym, someone who's actively counting on you,
Much harder to bail.
exactly, their expectation adds weight. They're invested in your success, which makes you more invested.
But the choice of who you tell is critical. You can't share your dream of being a race car driver with your brother who, makes fun of your driving
Yeah.
every chance he gets.
Absolutely not. That specific warning is crucial. You must share with people who are supportive, enthusiastic, people who believe in your potential. Sharing with naysayers or those who echo your own fears, that just drags you down.
Mhm.
Pick your cheerleaders carefully.
Besides just keeping you honest, sharing the plan can also bring unexpected benefits, right? Like feedback and maybe even opportunities.
Definitely. If you keep your plan a total secret, you shut yourself off from valuable external insights or connections. The author mentioned someone dreaming of doing 200 speaking gigs a year.
Wow, that's a lot.
Right. If you share that specific number with someone who's actually done extensive touring, they might immediately say, whoa, hang on. Do you realize the physical and mental toll of traveling 200 plus days? That's incredibly valuable feedback you might not have considered. It helps you spot blind spots and adjust before you burn out.
Which brings us, inevitably, to negative feedback. We all do it, get 97 positive comments and obsess over the 3 negative ones. How do we handle that?
Ah, the 97% rule. It reflects our brain's negativity bias. We're wired to pay more attention to threats or criticisms. The source mentioned the author's experience after giving a presentation. Tons of praise, but one parent was critical, saying the author didn't understand their pain.
And that's the comment that
That's
sticks.
the one you replay in your head, right?
So how do we actually train ourselves to focus on the 97% positive? Is there a practical technique?
The technique involves essentially compartmentalization and assessing the source. First, you deliberately give that -3% some attention, but a limited amount, maybe 5 minutes. Ask yourself honestly, is there a tiny grain of truth here, something genuinely useful I can learn?
Okay, a quick objective log.
Right. If there is, acknowledge it, maybe adjust something, but then, and this is key, you stop the loop. You consciously choose to shift your focus to the overwhelming positive feedback. You have to actively decide to believe the 97%. See it as the wind pushing you forward and refuse to let that tiny 3% anchor you.
Actively choose.
Mhm.
That leads us to phase 4, adaptation. What happens when the plan meets reality and things don't go? Well, according to plan. The key mindset shift here is huge. It's feedback, not failure.
That's the core of it. It's about iteration. We have to stop seeing setbacks as some kind of moral failing. The analogy used is writing a book. Nobody expects the first draft to be perfect. It needs revisions, editors, proofreaders. That's all just feedback to make it better. Your life plan needs that same approach.
So you need to be ready to pivot when an idea sounds good on paper, but just doesn't work in practice.
Ready, willing, and able. You have to be flexible. A really powerful example, obviously, was the pandemic hitting in early 2020.
Right, a massive, uncontrollable pivot for everyone.
Absolutely. The author had this plan heavily focused on building a public speaking career, envisioning packed auditoriums, then boom, lockdown, no events.
The plan was instantly obsolete.
Completely. No amount of positive thinking could change that reality. So the pivot had to be immediate. Shift all the focus to online platforms, the YouTube channel, the podcast, writing the book. And interestingly, that forced change potentially reached a wider audience than the original speaking tour might have.
So the process of planning, the ability to adapt, save the project, even when the original plan itself was useless.
That's it exactly. It underscores that a plan isn't something you write once and frame. It's a living document. You have to tend to it, revisit it.
So how often? What's the recommended schedule?
The advice is to formally check in every couple of months. Take it out, look at it, ask the tough questions. Are we still on track? Has anything become irrelevant because the world changed? Does the timeline need adjusting? Do we need different skills or people now?
Like the author having to push back the big speaking engagement steps on their list because of the pandemic uncertainty and book delays, realism has to guide the updates.
You got it. You have to be honest about where things stand and adjust the sequence or timing as needed.
And finally, there's a really interesting warning about the end game, about not rushing the finish line.
Yes, that's a common mistake. We get close to the end of a huge project and we sort of mentally check out or try to sprint through the last bit. But often that final phase is the most complex and requires the most careful attention.
The analogy was like the end of a close basketball game.
Right. The clock might say 2 minutes left, but with all the fouls, timeouts, and strategy, actually playing those final 2 minutes can take 10 minutes of real time. You can't relax. You have to execute meticulously right up until the final buzzer to actually secure the win. Rushing at the end can unravel years of hard work.
Play out the clock. That's a powerful image for endurance. Okay, so to wrap this up for you listening, write it down. Make your steps controllable. Create visual motivation with action boards. Find people who support you and hold you accountable. And crucially, treat every single setback as feedback. Learn from it and keep adapting.
That's the heart of it. It's all about the continuous process. We started by saying a positive mindset isn't enough without a plan. But maybe the deeper point connects to that famous quote from Dwight D. Eisenhower. Plans are nothing. Planning is everything.
Ah, interesting distinction.
Yeah. The initial document, the plan, is just a starting point, a rough map. It's the ongoing planning, the revising, adapting, pivoting, learning from feedback. That's the actual path forward. That's what gets you there.
So here's a final thought to chew on. If the plan itself is just a draft meant to be changed, and the real value is in the dynamic process of planning, how might fully embracing that constant need for revision actually free you from the fear of making mistakes, especially those first ones? If change is expected, required even, then maybe the pressure for initial perfection just evaporates. Think about that as you start mapping out your own big dream. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.